I was halfway through my third cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with an alert I never expected to see on a quiet Tuesday morning. Motion detected in backyard. Intruder present. The notification from my new security system made my heart skip a beat. I had installed the whole setup just 2 weeks ago after my neighbor mentioned some suspicious activity in our subdivision outside Charlotte, North Carolina. The cameras, motion sensors, and direct police alert feature had cost me nearly $3,000. But right now, watching the live feed on my phone, I realized every penny was worth it. There she was, clear as day on my screen. A woman in her late 40s with that distinctive haircut that screamed entitlement, the kind where the back is short and the front swoops down in an aggressive angle. She wore a crisp white polo shirt with our HOA logo embroidered on the chest and khaki capri pants. She was walking around my backyard like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, taking photographs of everything. I am Andrew Jenkins, a 32-year-old software engineer who moved to the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision about 8 months ago. I bought my first house, a nice 3-bedroom ranch with a decent backyard where I could finally have the garden I always wanted. The HOA seemed reasonable when I signed the papers. The fees were not outrageous, and the rules appeared standard. Keep your lawn mowed, no crazy paint colors, no cars on blocks in the driveway. Simple stuff. What I did not know was that Patricia Vanderbilt, the HOA president, would become the bane of my existence. I watched her on the camera feed, now zooming in on my tomato plants. The security system had already sent an automatic alert to the police, as I had programmed it to do for any unauthorized entry into my backyard. The fence gate was clearly closed and locked, which meant she had either climbed over or found another way in. Either way, she was trespassing. My doorbell camera showed no sign that she had even attempted to knock on my front door. She had just decided to waltz into my private property without permission, without warning, without anything. I grabbed my phone and headed toward the back door, keeping my movements calm and measured. I wanted to see how this would play out. The app showed that police had received the alert and were already dispatched. Response time in our area was usually pretty good, around 5 to 7 minutes. Through my kitchen window, I could see Patricia more clearly now. She was examining my garden shed, trying the handle. That shed contained my lawn equipment, tools, and various gardening supplies. Nothing illegal, nothing unusual, but it was mine. She had no right to be testing my locks. "What are you doing?" I called out as I stepped onto my back patio. Patricia jumped slightly, clearly not expecting me to be home. She recovered quickly, her face shifting into that particular expression of condescending authority that some people wear like a badge. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, adjusting her grip on the clipboard. "I am conducting a routine property inspection as outlined in the HOA bylaws, Section 12. Paragraph 4. I crossed my arms, staying calm. Section 12. Paragraph 4 requires you to provide written notice at least 48 hours in advance and to be accompanied by the homeowner or have explicit written permission to enter the property. You have done neither." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I left a notice on your door yesterday." "No, you did not. I have a doorbell camera that records everything. You have not been to my front door in over a week." I pulled out my phone, showing her the live feed. "And more importantly, you are currently trespassing." My security system has already alerted the police. The color drained from Patricia's face. "You called the cops on me. I am the HOA president. I have the authority to inspect properties for violations. You have the authority to schedule inspections with proper notice. You do not have the authority to break into my backyard whenever you feel like it. I kept my voice level, even though anger was building in my chest. How did you even get back here? The gate is locked. She hesitated, then pointed toward the side of my house. The side gate was open. No, it was not. I check all my gates every morning. That is why I have cameras pointed at them. I pulled up the footage from this morning, showing both gates firmly latched and locked. So I will ask again, how did you get into my backyard? Before Patricia could answer, I heard the distinct sound of a police siren in the distance, getting closer. Her eyes widened and she took a step toward the back fence. I would not recommend trying to leave, I said. That would make this look even worse. 2 Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department vehicles pulled up in front of my house less than a minute later. I walked through my house to the front door, leaving Patricia in the backyard with no escape route. The fence was 6 feet tall on all sides, and I doubted she had the athleticism to scale it quickly, especially not in front of law enforcement. 2 officers met me at the front door. The first was a tall African-American man in his 30s with a calm demeanor. His nameplate read Officer Morrison. The second was a shorter Hispanic woman who looked like she had seen everything twice. Her nameplate said Officer Ramirez. Andrew Jenkins, Officer Morrison asked. That is me. Thank you for responding so quickly. I have an intruder in my backyard. She is still there. Your security system alert said there was an unauthorized person on your property, Officer Ramirez said, her hand resting casually on her belt. Can you explain the situation? I led them through my house, explaining as we walked. That is Patricia Vanderbilt, my HOA president. She decided to enter my backyard without permission, without notice, and without any legitimate reason. I have video footage of her arriving, and she definitely did not come through any open gate like she claimed. We stepped out onto the back patio. Patricia stood near my garden shed, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. When she saw the police officers, her expression shifted from defiant to uncertain. Officers, this is a misunderstanding, she started immediately. I am the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I was simply conducting a property inspection. Officer Morrison looked at her, then at me. Madam, does your HOA allow you to enter private property without the owner's permission? Our bylaws give me the authority to ensure all properties are in compliance with our community standards, Patricia said, her voice taking on that lecturing tone again. That is not what I asked, Officer Morrison replied. Do your bylaws specifically give you permission to enter someone's private, fenced backyard without their knowledge or consent? Patricia's mouth opened and closed. I left notice. You did not, I interjected, pulling up my doorbell footage on my phone. Here is every person who has approached my front door in the past 72 hours. You are not among them. Officer Ramirez stepped forward. Madam, how did you enter this backyard? The gates appear to be locked. The silence stretched out. Patricia looked at her shoes, then at the fence, then back at the officers. I may have used a ladder from the side of the house to look over the fence, and then I found a way to climb down. My jaw dropped. You brought a ladder. You actually brought a ladder to climb into my yard. I needed to document violations, Patricia said, her voice rising defensively. You have planted vegetables in ground beds instead of approved raised containers. Your shed is 6 inches over the maximum allowed square footage. Your fence has not been stained in the required color scheme. None of that gives you the right to trespass, Officer Morrison said firmly. Madam, I need to see your identification. Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her wallet and handed over her driver's license. Officer Ramirez took it and walked a few feet away, speaking into her radio. Mr. Jenkins, do you want to press charges for trespassing? Officer Morrison asked me. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to just let her go with a warning, but another part of me knew that if I did not stand my ground now, Patricia would continue to harass me and probably escalate her behavior. "Yes, I do," I said firmly. "She violated my privacy, entered my property illegally, and has been harassing me since I moved in 8 months ago. This needs to stop." Patricia's face went red. "Harassment? I am doing my job. Someone needs to maintain standards in this community. Do you know how hard I work to keep property values high? Do you have any idea how many hours I volunteer?" "Volunteering does not give you the right to break the law," Officer Morrison said. "Madam, I am going to need you to step over here." Officer Ramirez returned and nodded to her partner. They spoke quietly for a moment, then Officer Morrison turned to Patricia. "Miss Vanderbilt, you are being cited for criminal trespassing. This is a misdemeanor offense. You will need to appear in court on the date listed on this citation." He began writing out the ticket. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like tears of rage than sadness. "This is ridiculous. I am being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. Wait until the HOA board hears about this." "The HOA board is going to hear about it regardless," I said. "Because I am going to file a formal complaint about your conduct, and I am going to request a full audit of your activities as president." "You cannot do that," Patricia sputtered. "Actually, according to our bylaws, any homeowner can request an audit with a petition signed by 20% of the community. I think I can get those signatures pretty easily once people hear about this." Officer Morrison handed Patricia the citation. "Madam, you need to leave this property now and not return unless you have explicit permission from Mr. Jenkins. Do you understand?" Patricia snatched the citation from his hand. "I understand perfectly. This community is going to fall apart without proper oversight." "You will regret this, Mr. Jenkins." "Was that a threat?" Officer Ramirez asked sharply. Patricia blanched. "No, of course not. I just meant that without proper HOA enforcement, property values will decline." "Right," Officer Ramirez said, clearly not buying it. "Let me be clear, Miss Vanderbilt. If you come onto this property again without permission, you will be arrested. If you harass Mr. Jenkins in any way, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" "Yes," Patricia said through gritted teeth. The officers escorted her through my house and out to the front. I followed, wanting to make sure she actually left. When we reached the front yard, I saw Patricia's white SUV parked on the street. But what caught my attention was the extension ladder lying in my side yard, partially hidden behind my air conditioning unit. "Officers," I said, pointing. "That is how she got in." We walked over to examine the ladder. It was a standard aluminum extension ladder, the kind you could buy at any hardware store. Patricia had apparently propped it against my fence, climbed over, and then pulled it through or left it there. The audacity was stunning. "Is this your ladder, Miss Vanderbilt?" Officer Morrison asked. "I borrowed it from the HOA maintenance shed," Patricia admitted. "So you premeditated entering this property without permission," Officer Ramirez noted. "You brought equipment specifically to bypass the locked gates." Patricia did not respond. She walked to her SUV, got in, and drove away without looking back. The officers helped me move the ladder to my garage, and then we stood in my driveway discussing what would happen next. "The citation requires her to appear in court," Officer Morrison explained. "You will likely be called as a witness. Make sure you keep all your security footage. That will be important evidence." "I have everything backed up to the cloud," I assured him. "The system keeps recordings for 90 days. "Good. Also, you might want to consider getting a restraining order if she continues to bother you," Officer Ramirez added. "Judges take HOA harassment pretty seriously these days, especially with clear evidence like you have." After the officers left, I went back inside and poured myself another cup of coffee. My hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. I could not believe what had just happened. An HOA president had actually climbed a ladder into my backyard to look for violations. It was insane. I spent the next hour downloading all the relevant security footage and organizing it into a folder. The doorbell camera, the backyard cameras, the side yard cameras, everything showed a clear timeline of Patricia's trespassing. I also pulled out my HOA documents and began reading through them carefully, looking for everything related to property inspections, board member conduct, and the process for filing complaints. Section 12, paragraph 4 was exactly as I remembered it. Property inspections required 48 hours written notice and had to be scheduled at a mutually convenient time. The board member conducting the inspection had to be accompanied by the homeowner or have explicit written permission. There were no exceptions listed. Section 7 covered board member conduct and responsibilities. It stated that board members must act in the best interest of the community, must not abuse their authority, and must respect the rights and privacy of all homeowners. Patricia had violated all three principles. Section 19 outlined the complaint process. Any homeowner could file a formal complaint against a board member by submitting a written statement to the board secretary. The board then had 30 days to investigate and respond. If 20% of homeowners signed a petition, they could call for a special meeting to address the issue, including potentially removing a board member. I started drafting my complaint letter. I included a detailed description of what happened, references to the specific bylaws Patricia had violated, and a list of all the security footage I had as evidence. I also noted that this was not an isolated incident. Patricia had been harassing me for months with petty violation notices, aggressive emails, and drive-by inspections where she would park in front of my house and take pictures. Just as I finished the first draft of my letter, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize, but the area code was local. "Hello, is this Andrew Jenkins?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Denise Carmichael. I am the secretary of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board. I just heard about the incident with Patricia this morning, and I wanted to reach out to you personally." I sat up straighter. "How did you hear about it already?" "Patricia called me, extremely upset, claiming you had her arrested for doing her job." However, I also received a call from Officer Morrison, who wanted to verify some details about our HOA bylaws. He gave me a very different version of events. Denise paused. "Mr. Jenkins, I want you to know that Patricia's behavior does not represent the board as a whole. What she did was completely inappropriate and possibly illegal." "I am glad to hear you say that," I replied carefully. "I was planning to file a formal complaint." "Please do. In fact, I encourage you to do so as soon as possible." Between you and me, this is not the first time Patricia has overstepped her authority. We have had other complaints, but they were usually about minor things: rude emails, aggressive enforcement of petty rules. Nothing like this. Actually breaking into someone's property is a serious escalation. "Other complaints?" I asked. "How many?" Denise hesitated. "I should not discuss other homeowners' complaints with you, but I will say that you are not alone in your frustrations. Patricia has a very particular vision for this community, and she tends to see any deviation from that vision as a personal attack. That is putting it mildly. Look, Mr. Jenkins, I am going to be honest with you. The board has been concerned about Patricia for a while now. She was elected president 3 years ago, and at first she was great, very organized, very dedicated. But over time, she has become more controlling and more aggressive. Some of us have tried to talk to her about it, but she just accuses us of not caring about the community. So what happens now? I asked. File your formal complaint. I will make sure it is addressed at our next board meeting, which is in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I am going to recommend to the other board members that we temporarily suspend Patricia's inspection privileges pending an investigation. She should not be entering anyone's property unsupervised right now. I appreciate that, and just so you know, I have extensive video evidence of what happened. Please include that with your complaint. The more documentation we have, the better. Denise sighed. I am really sorry this happened to you. You should not have to deal with this kind of harassment in your own home. After I hung up with Denise, I felt slightly better about the situation. At least some members of the board seemed reasonable and willing to address the problem. I finished my complaint letter, attached links to all the security footage, and sent it via email to the board secretary as outlined in the bylaws. I also sent a hard copy via certified mail, just to cover all my bases. The rest of the day passed quietly. I worked from home, as I usually did 3 days a week, and tried to focus on my coding projects. But my mind kept wandering back to the incident. I found myself checking my security cameras obsessively, half expecting Patricia to return with another ladder and even more audacity. That evening, my next-door neighbor, Tom Richardson, knocked on my door. Tom was a retired accountant in his mid-60s, a nice guy who mostly kept to himself but was always friendly when we crossed paths. "Andrew, I heard you had some excitement today," he said when I opened the door. "News travels fast. Small neighborhood. Patricia drove past my house looking furious, and then I saw the police cars at your place. What happened?" I invited Tom in and gave him the full story. His eyes widened as I described Patricia climbing into my backyard with a ladder. "You know, that explains something," Tom said when I finished. "About a month ago, I could swear I heard someone in my backyard late one evening. I went out to check, but I did not see anyone. I found muddy footprints near my fence, though. I thought maybe it was kids cutting through the yards." "Do you have security cameras?" "No, but I am thinking I should get some now." Tom shook his head. "Patricia has always been intense about HOA rules, but I never thought she would actually trespass. That is crossing a serious line. Denise Carmichael, the board secretary, called me today. She said there have been other complaints about Patricia. I am not surprised. She gave my wife a violation notice last year because our mailbox had a small dent in it. A dent. She wanted us to replace the entire mailbox within 14 days or face a fine. We fought it and won, but it was a hassle. We talked for a while longer, and by the time Tom left, he had agreed to sign any petition I might circulate about Patricia's conduct. He also mentioned that several other neighbors would probably be interested in joining the effort. Over the next few days, I focused on gathering support. I printed out a simple petition that stated Patricia Vanderbilt had violated HOA bylaws and homeowner rights through her conduct as president, and that we, the undersigned, requested a special board meeting to address her behavior and determine appropriate consequences, up to and including removal from the board. I went door to door in the neighborhood, talking to people I had only waved to in passing before. The response was overwhelming. Out of the 43 homes in Meadowbrook Estates, I needed signatures from 9 homeowners to reach the 20% threshold. I got 17 signatures in 3 days. The stories people told me were infuriating. Patricia had fined one family for having a small crack in their driveway. She had threatened another with legal action because their grass was supposedly half an inch too long, even though they had mowed it the day before. She had sent nasty letters to a young couple about their decorative garden gnome, claiming it violated the tasteful yard decoration clause in the bylaws. One woman, Sandra Mitchell, broke down in tears when I talked to her. Patricia had harassed her relentlessly after Sandra painted her front door a shade of blue that was apparently not on the pre-approved color list. The color was barely distinguishable from the approved navy blue, but Patricia had insisted it was too bright and sent weekly violation notices until Sandra finally repainted the door, costing her several $100s. "I am so glad someone is finally standing up to her," Sandra said, signing the petition with shaking hands. "I have been terrified to even plant flowers in my front yard because I do not know what arbitrary rule she will say I am breaking." By the end of the week, I had more than enough signatures. I compiled the petition, attached all the signatures, and sent it to the board along with a request for a special meeting within the next 30 days, as allowed by the bylaws. The court date for Patricia's trespassing citation was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia was furious about the petition and was telling anyone who would listen that I was trying to destroy the HOA and ruin property values. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after the trespassing incident. It was held in the community clubhouse, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance that was used for meetings and occasional social events. I arrived 15 minutes early and found the parking lot already half full. Apparently, word had spread about the meeting and what it was about. People wanted to see what would happen. Inside, rows of chairs faced a long table where the board members sat. Patricia was there, sitting in the center seat with her arms crossed and a scowl on her face. To her left were Denise Carmichael, the secretary, and Frank Morrison, the treasurer. To her right were 2 other board members I had not met before. The room filled up quickly. I counted at least 30 people in attendance, which was remarkable considering most board meetings attracted only a handful of residents. Denise called the meeting to order at 7 o'clock sharp. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. We have several items on the agenda tonight, but I think we all know the main reason for this special meeting. Mr. Andrew Jenkins has filed a formal complaint against our president, Patricia Vanderbilt, regarding her conduct and alleged violations of HOA bylaws and homeowner rights. Additionally, Mr. Jenkins submitted a petition signed by over 35% of our homeowners requesting that we address this matter." Patricia leaned forward. "I would like to make a statement." "You will have your opportunity," Denise said firmly. "But first, we are going to review the complaint and the evidence. Mr. Jenkins, would you like to present your case?" I stood up, my heart pounding. Public speaking was not my favorite thing, but I had prepared thoroughly. I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector. "Thank you. On the morning of Tuesday, the 8th, Patricia Vanderbilt illegally entered my backyard without my knowledge or permission. She did not provide the required 48 hours notice as outlined in Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our bylaws. She did not attempt to contact me or schedule an inspection. Instead, she brought a ladder, climbed over my locked fence, and proceeded to conduct an unauthorized inspection of my property. I played the security footage on the screen. The room went silent as everyone watched Patricia climbing into my yard, walking around with her clipboard, and trying the handle on my shed. The timestamp clearly showed she had been there for nearly 15 minutes before I discovered her. When I confronted her, she claimed she had left notice on my door. She had not. I played the doorbell camera footage showing the previous 72 hours with no sign of Patricia. She also claimed my side gate was open. It was not. I showed the morning footage of me checking both gates, confirming they were locked. My security system automatically alerted the police. Officers Morrison and Ramirez of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department responded and cited Miss Vanderbilt for criminal trespassing. She admitted to using a ladder to enter my property without permission. The murmuring in the room grew louder. I could see shock and disbelief on many faces. This is not just about one incident, I continued. Since I moved to Meadowbrook Estates 8 months ago, I have received dozens of violation notices from Miss Vanderbilt, many of them for trivial or non-existent violations. She has sent me threatening emails, parked in front of my house to take photographs without my knowledge, and created a hostile living environment. I pulled up a folder containing all of Patricia's emails and violation notices. I have documented everything. Here is a notice claiming my grass was too long, sent on a day when my lawn service had mowed that morning. Here is an email threatening fines because she claimed my trash cans were visible from the street, even though they were in my garage with the door closed. Here is a violation notice about my mailbox being tarnished when it was simply weathered from normal use. This is absurd, Patricia interrupted, standing up. I was doing my job. Mr. Jenkins moved into this community and immediately started violating our standards. Someone has to maintain order. You do not maintain order by breaking the law, Frank Morrison, the treasurer, said quietly. Patricia shot him a venomous look. Miss Vanderbilt, you will have your turn to speak, Denise said. Mr. Jenkins, please continue. I also want to share that I am not alone in experiencing harassment from Miss Vanderbilt. Over the past week, I have spoken with many of our neighbors who have similar stories. Some have agreed to share their experiences tonight. One by one, 5 other homeowners stood up and recounted their interactions with Patricia. Sandra Mitchell talked about the door paint incident. Tom Richardson described the mailbox violation. A young father named Marcus told how Patricia had threatened to fine him $100 per day because his son's bicycle was left in the front yard overnight once. The pattern was clear. Patricia had been systematically harassing residents over minor or imagined violations, using her position as HOA president to bully people into compliance with her personal vision of what the neighborhood should look like. By the time the last homeowner finished speaking, Patricia's face was bright red. She stood up abruptly. I have heard enough of this character assassination. These people are exaggerating and lying because they do not want to follow the rules. Every single violation I have issued was legitimate and based on our bylaws. I have dedicated countless hours to this community, and this is how I am repaid. With accusations and complaints. No one is questioning your dedication, Denise said carefully. But we are questioning your methods and your judgment. You broke the law, Patricia. You trespassed on a homeowner's property. The police gave you a citation. That is not something we can ignore. It was a misunderstanding, Patricia insisted. You brought a ladder and climbed over a locked fence, Frank said. That is not a misunderstanding. That is premeditated trespassing. Patricia's hands were shaking. I was trying to document violations. Mr. Jenkins has a shed that exceeds the maximum square footage. He has vegetable gardens in ground beds instead of raised containers. His fence is not stained in the proper color. Even if all of that were true, Denise said, it does not give you the right to enter his property without permission. You violated his privacy and his rights as a homeowner. You also violated our bylaws, which clearly state that inspections require notice and consent. I disagree with your interpretation of the bylaws, Patricia said. It is not open to interpretation, Frank replied. The language is very clear. The 2 other board members who had been quiet until now finally spoke up. The older man, whose name was George, said, "I move that we temporarily suspend Patricia Vanderbilt from her duties as HOA president pending a full investigation into her conduct and the resolution of her criminal trespassing charge." The woman, whose name was Linda, said, "I second the motion." Patricia looked stunned. "You cannot do this. I am the president." "We can and we are," Denise said. All in favor, 4 hands went up. Only Patricia's hand stayed down. The motion passes. Patricia, effective immediately, you are suspended from your role as president. You are not to conduct any HOA business, issue any violation notices, or enter any homeowner's property. You are still welcome to attend board meetings as a member, but you have no authority to act on behalf of the HOA. Patricia grabbed her purse and clipboard. "You are all making a huge mistake. This community needs strong leadership, and you are throwing me out because one troublemaker complained." 35% of our homeowners signed a petition, Frank pointed out. That is not one troublemaker. That is a significant portion of our community expressing serious concerns. Patricia stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door behind her. The room erupted in conversation. Some people looked relieved, others shocked. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Denise called the meeting back to order. "We need to elect an interim president. I nominate Frank Morrison." The vote was unanimous. Frank accepted the role and immediately made a statement. "I want everyone here to know that this board is committed to fair and reasonable enforcement of our HOA rules. We will not tolerate harassment or abuse of authority. If anyone has experienced problems similar to what Mr. Jenkins and the others described tonight, please come forward. We want to review all of Patricia's actions over the past year and make sure we address any issues." After the meeting ended, dozens of people came up to me to shake my hand and thank me for speaking up. Several mentioned that they had been planning to move out of the neighborhood because of Patricia's harassment, but now they felt hopeful that things would improve. The next 3 weeks were relatively peaceful. Patricia stayed away from my property, and I heard through the grapevine that she was also avoiding most of her neighbors. The board launched a full investigation into her conduct, reviewing all the violation notices she had issued over the past 2 years. The court date for Patricia's trespassing charge arrived on a rainy Wednesday morning. I drove to the Mecklenburg County Courthouse and met with the prosecutor, a young assistant district attorney named Rachel Foster, who reviewed my evidence. "This is pretty cut and dry," Rachel said after watching the security footage. "She clearly trespassed, and we have video proof. Most people would plead this down to a lesser charge and accept a small fine. Has she contacted you about a plea deal?" "No, I have not heard anything from her or her attorney." "Interesting. Well, let's see what happens in court." When the case was called, Patricia appeared with an attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked annoyed to be there. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Judge Henderson, reviewed the case file. "Miss Vanderbilt, you are charged with criminal trespassing. How do you plead?" Patricia's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We believe this is a misunderstanding. Miss Vanderbilt is the president of the Homeowners Association and was conducting her duties as outlined in the HOA bylaws. The HOA bylaws do not supersede state criminal law," Judge Henderson said dryly. "Mr. Jenkins, you are the complainant." I stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have evidence to present?" Rachel Foster stood. "Your Honor, the state would like to present video evidence from Mr. Jenkins's security system." The footage was played in the courtroom. It showed everything. Patricia with the ladder, climbing over my fence, walking around my backyard, examining my shed and being confronted by me, and then the police officers. The timestamp and location data were clearly visible. Judge Henderson watched in silence. When the video ended, she looked at Patricia. "Miss Vanderbilt, did you have Mr. Jenkins's permission to enter his property?" "I was performing my duties as HOA president," Patricia said. "That is not what I asked. Did you have his explicit permission to enter his fenced backyard?" "No, but did you provide the required notice as outlined in your HOA bylaws?" Patricia hesitated. "I believed I had the authority to conduct inspections." "Belief is not the same as legal authority," Judge Henderson said. "Miss Vanderbilt, the evidence is overwhelming. You brought a ladder, climbed over a locked fence, and entered private property without permission. That is trespassing, plain and simple. I find you guilty as charged." Patricia's face went pale. Her attorney whispered something to her, but she shook her head. "Miss Vanderbilt, this appears to be your first offense, so I am going to be lenient. You are sentenced to 30 days in jail, suspended, meaning you will not serve time unless you violate probation. You are placed on probation for 1 year. During that time, you are not to have any contact with Mr. Jenkins except through official HOA channels, and even then, only if absolutely necessary. You are not to enter his property or photograph his property. You will also pay a fine of $500 and court costs. Additionally, Judge Henderson continued, I am issuing a restraining order. Miss Vanderbilt, you are to stay at least 100 feet away from Mr. Jenkins's residence unless you are simply driving past on the public street. Any violation of this order will result in your immediate arrest. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said quietly. As we left the courthouse, Rachel Foster pulled me aside. If she violates that restraining order, call the police immediately. Judge Henderson does not issue those lightly. She clearly thought Patricia's behavior was serious enough to warrant extra protection for you. Thank you for your help, I said. Just doing my job. Enjoy your peace and quiet. The news of Patricia's conviction and restraining order spread through the neighborhood quickly. The HOA board held another meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia from the board entirely. Frank Morrison was elected as the permanent president, and the board adopted new policies to prevent future abuse of power. The new policies included mandatory training for all board members on property rights and legal boundaries, a requirement that all property inspections be scheduled in advance with at least 1 week notice, and a new complaint process that allowed homeowners to appeal violation notices to the full board, not just the president. Frank also initiated a comprehensive review of all violation notices issued during Patricia's tenure. They found that over 60% of them were for trivial or non-existent violations. The board formally rescinded those notices and issued apologies to the affected homeowners. A month after the court case, I was working in my backyard, planting new tomato seedlings in my ground beds when Tom Richardson called over the fence. "Andrew, you will never believe what I just heard." "What is it?" "Patricia put her house up for sale. She is moving out of the neighborhood." I felt a mix of relief and something like pity. I guess she could not handle living here after everything that happened. Can you blame her? After she was removed from the board and got a criminal record, she became a pariah. Nobody wanted anything to do with her. Tom paused. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. I do feel bad in a way, I admitted. I think she genuinely believed she was helping the community. She just took it way too far and let the power go to her head. That is generous of you, considering she made your life miserable. Maybe. But holding on to anger does not help anyone. She is facing the consequences of her actions. That is enough for me. Over the following months, life in Meadowbrook Estates improved dramatically. The new board was reasonable and focused on actual community improvements, rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. They organized neighborhood events, improved the common areas, and created a community garden where several of us grew vegetables together. Patricia's house sold quickly, and I heard she moved to another town about an hour away. I never saw her again after the courthouse. One evening, about 6 months after the whole incident began, I was sitting on my back patio, enjoying a cold beer and admiring my thriving vegetable garden. My tomatoes were producing abundantly, and I had recently added some pepper plants and herbs. The shed that Patricia had been so concerned about now had a fresh coat of paint, though it was still technically 6 inches over the maximum allowed square footage. Nobody cared. My doorbell rang, and I found Frank Morrison standing on my front porch with a bottle of wine. "Frank, come on in. What brings you by?" "I wanted to thank you properly," he said, handing me the wine. "I know the whole situation with Patricia was stressful and probably not how you wanted to spend your first year in the neighborhood, but you standing up to her really changed things for the better. I just did what needed to be done. Maybe, but a lot of people would not have bothered. They would have just kept their heads down or moved away." Frank settled into a chair on my patio. "I have to admit, I was worried about the HOA when Patricia was in charge. She was driving people away and creating so much conflict. Now we actually have people volunteering for committees and participating in community events. That is how it should be. We talked for a while about the neighborhood, the HOA, and how things had changed. Frank mentioned that they were considering updating some of the bylaws to remove outdated and overly restrictive rules. That shed size limit, for example, Frank said. It is completely arbitrary. As long as your shed is not blocking your neighbor's view or creating a safety hazard, who cares if it is 50 square feet or 56 square feet? "I appreciate that," I said with a laugh. "And the whole thing about ground beds versus raised containers for vegetables. Where did that even come from? It makes no sense. We are going to remove that restriction too." After Frank left, I sat outside a while longer, reflecting on everything that had happened. When I first got that security alert showing Patricia in my backyard, I had no idea it would lead to court cases, board meetings, and a complete transformation of the HOA. The security system that prompted all of this was still working perfectly, silently monitoring my property and giving me peace of mind. I checked the app on my phone, seeing the familiar views of my backyard, side yard, and front door. Everything was quiet and secure. A notification popped up. Doorbell camera detected package delivery. I watched the brief video of the UPS driver dropping off a box and waving at the camera. Normal, everyday life. That is what I had wanted when I bought this house. Just a normal, peaceful place to live. No drama, no harassment, no HOA president climbing into my backyard with a ladder. It had taken some effort to get here, and I had to stand up for myself in ways I never expected, but it was worth it. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA board. They were officially recognizing several community members who had contributed to improving the neighborhood. My name was on the list, along with Tom Richardson, Sandra Mitchell, and a few others who had spoken up about Patricia's behavior. Your courage in addressing difficult issues and your commitment to fair treatment for all homeowners has made Meadowbrook Estates a better place to live, the email read. Thank you for your service to our community. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. I printed out the email and put it in a folder with all the other documents from the past 6 months. The security footage, the police reports, the complaint letters, the court documents, and the board meeting minutes. Someday, maybe I would look back on all of this and laugh. For now, I was just glad it was over. I spent the weekend working on my garden, installing some new lighting around the patio, and generally enjoying my property without worrying about surprise inspections or violation notices. The weather was perfect, warm but not too hot, with a gentle breeze that made the wind chimes on my porch sing softly. On Sunday afternoon, I was pruning my tomato plants when I noticed someone walking down the sidewalk, slowing down as they passed my house. For a moment my heart rate spiked, worried it might be Patricia. But it was just a young couple I did not recognize, probably looking at houses in the neighborhood. They smiled and waved, and I waved back. That evening I got a text from Tom. Neighborhood barbecue at the clubhouse next Saturday. You coming? Definitely, I replied. The barbecue was well attended, with probably 40 or 50 people showing up throughout the afternoon. The atmosphere was relaxed and friendly. People brought food to share. Kids played in the common area, and someone set up a cornhole game that became surprisingly competitive. I met several neighbors I had never spoken to before. One couple, Emily and Mark, had lived in the neighborhood for 5 years but had rarely come to community events because of Patricia's hostile attitude toward anyone who questioned her authority. She sent us a violation notice for having a Christmas wreath on our door in January, Emily told me. We forgot to take it down right after New Year's, and she acted like we had committed a crime. After that, we just avoided anything HOA related. Things are different now, I said. Frank is doing a great job, we can tell. This is the first neighborhood event we have attended in 3 years, and we are actually having fun. As the sun set and the barbecue wound down, Frank stood up and made a brief announcement. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. This is what community is supposed to be about. Neighbors getting to know each other, supporting each other, and enjoying where we live. We have had some challenges over the past year, but I think we are in a good place now. Let's keep this positive momentum going. People applauded, and I felt genuinely happy to be part of this community. It had been a rough start, but things had turned around completely. Life continued peacefully through the summer and into the fall. I expanded my garden, adding a small greenhouse where I could start seedlings and grow herbs year-round. My security system remained vigilant, but the most exciting alerts I got were for delivery drivers and the occasional curious squirrel. One October evening, I was watching a football game when my phone buzzed with a text from Denise Carmichael. Hi, Andrew. Hope you are doing well. Quick question. Would you be interested in joining the HOA board? We have an opening, and several people have suggested you would be a great fit. I thought about it for a moment. A year ago, I would have laughed at the idea of being on an HOA board, but after everything that had happened, maybe I could help make sure the community stayed on the right track. I am interested, I texted back. Let's talk about what would be involved. The following week, Denise called me and explained the position. It was the role of vice president, which mainly involved helping Frank with various administrative tasks, attending monthly board meetings, and serving on a few committees. The time commitment was reasonable, maybe 5 to 10 hours a month. Why me? I asked. Because you care about doing things the right way, Denise said. You stood up for yourself and for other homeowners when it would have been easier to just let things go. You understand the importance of rules, but you also understand that rules should serve the community, not the other way around. That is exactly the kind of perspective we need on the board. I accepted the position and was officially appointed at the next board meeting. My first few months on the board were a learning experience. I gained a new appreciation for how much work went into running an HOA, even a small one like ours. But I also saw opportunities to improve things and make the community even better. One of my first initiatives was to create a welcome package for new homeowners. It included a simplified version of the bylaws, contact information for all board members, and a friendly letter explaining how the HOA worked. The goal was to make sure new residents felt informed and supported, not intimidated or confused. I also worked with Frank to update the violation notice process. Instead of immediately issuing formal notices for minor issues, we implemented a friendly reminder system. If someone's grass got a little too long or their trash can stayed out past pickup day, they would get a courteous email or phone call suggesting they address it, with no threat of fines unless the issue persisted and became a genuine problem. The changes were well received. Homeowner satisfaction improved significantly, and the atmosphere in the neighborhood became noticeably more positive. People took pride in their properties not because they feared violation notices, but because they genuinely cared about the community. As my one-year anniversary of moving to Meadowbrook Estates approached, I reflected on how much had changed. What started as a nightmare situation with an out-of-control HOA president had ultimately led to positive transformation for the entire community. The security system that caught Patricia trespassing in my backyard had proven to be one of the best investments I ever made. It had given me the evidence I needed to stand up for myself and ultimately helped restore sanity to the HOA. But more than that, it had given me peace of mind. I knew my property was secure, and I had documentation if anything ever went wrong again. On the actual anniversary of moving in, Tom and his wife hosted a small dinner party and invited me along with several other neighbors. As we sat around their dining table, sharing food and conversation, someone brought up the Patricia incident. "Can you believe it has been a year since all that craziness?" Tom said. "Seems like ancient history now." "It does," I agreed, "but I am glad it happened in a way." If Patricia had never crossed that line, the HOA might have continued down a really destructive path. Sometimes it takes a crisis to create real change. "Spoken like a true board member," Sandra Mitchell joked, and everyone laughed. The dinner party lasted late into the evening, with easy conversation and genuine warmth among neighbors who had become friends. This was what I had hoped for when I bought my house. A sense of community, of belonging, of being part of something good. As I walked home that night, I passed by houses with neat lawns and tasteful decorations, garage doors closed for the night, porch lights glowing welcomingly. Everything looked peaceful and orderly, but not in the oppressive way it had under Patricia's regime. This was a community that people were proud of, not one they were afraid of. My phone buzzed with a routine security alert. Nighttime mode activated. All systems armed. I smiled at the notification. That system had started this whole journey, capturing evidence of trespassing that led to justice, accountability, and ultimately, positive change. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, grateful for my home, my community, and the strange path that had brought me to this moment of contentment. The past year had been chaotic and stressful at times, but I had learned important lessons about standing up for what is right, about the importance of reasonable governance, and about the power of community when people work together toward common goals. My backyard, visible through the kitchen window, looked tranquil in the moonlight. The tomato plants had been harvested for the season, and the garden beds were ready for winter. The shed that had caused so much controversy stood quietly in the corner, now officially approved despite being 6 inches over the old arbitrary limit. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at my kitchen table, opening my laptop to check emails. There was a message from Frank about the next board meeting agenda, a note from Denise about a potential holiday party at the clubhouse, and a friendly message from a new homeowner thanking me for the welcome package and asking a question about trash pickup schedules. I responded to each email, handling my HOA responsibilities with care and attention. It felt good to be part of something constructive, to help maintain a community that balanced reasonable standards with respect for individual homeowners. Before bed, I did my usual routine of checking all the security cameras one more time. Front yard, clear. Side yards, clear. Backyard, clear. Everything was as it should be. No intruders, no drama, no HOA presidents with ladders. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about how one moment can change everything. That Tuesday morning when my phone alerted me to an intruder in my backyard, I had no idea what would follow. The police response, the court case, the board meetings, the transformation of the HOA. My own journey from frustrated homeowner to board member, none of it was planned, but all of it had led somewhere good. The security system had done its job perfectly, alerting me to a threat and providing the evidence needed to address it. But more importantly, it had empowered me to take action, to stand up for myself and others, to demand better from those in positions of authority. Patricia Vanderbilt had learned a hard lesson about the limits of power and the consequences of overstepping boundaries. The HOA had learned the importance of reasonable governance and respect for homeowners. The community had learned that change was possible when people spoke up and worked together. And I had learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is refuse to back down when you know you are right, even when it is uncomfortable or difficult. That decision to press charges, to file complaints, to gather signatures and demand accountability, it had all been worth it. As for my backyard, it remained my private sanctuary, protected by fences, locks, and a state-of-the-art security system that had already proven its worth. No one would walk uninvited into my space again without immediate consequences. That peace of mind was priceless. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was the soft ping of another security notification. All systems normal. Good night. Indeed it was.